Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as you may consume to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member Scott, for your time and leadership in this matter. I rise today in opposition to this bill. Monday night, the Rules Committee considered my amendment number 16 to H.R. 1147, which would have provided an alternative, a healthy alternative to young people that cannot digest milk. I've heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle suggest that this was a choice. Well, if there were a choice, why not add soy as a choice? Soy gives the equivalent of the nutritional values as whole milk, but it does not have the negative impact that whole milk has on a large swath of people in our community. I will tell you the numbers. 95% of Native Americans have lactose intolerance. 90% of African Americans lactose intolerant. 65% of Latino Americans, 65% are in fact lactose intolerant. Asian Americans, 90%. These are real numbers. This is not about taste. This is not about profit. This is not about bottom line. This is not about a powerful lobby. This is about the safety, nutrition, and well-being of our young people. We cannot ignore impacts that ingesting, attempting to digest things that your body cannot, and what impact it has on one's ability to concentrate or do well in the classroom. My colleagues and I formed a diverse group represented by chairs of the Congressional Hispanic and Asian and Pacific Islander caucuses and vice chairs as vice chair of the CBC respectfully. We all firmly believe that the full House should be allowed to debate this important measure, making sure that we were given the opportunity on the floor to debate this amendment, which I believe, if given the opportunity to be heard, even the other side could have and would have been able to support. What's most perplexing is that now this amendment aligns with the purposes of the underlying bill to expand choice and deliver healthy beverages to the school counter. Our amendment is based on the text of my bill, H.R. 1619, the Add Soy Act. It amends Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Program to strike the onerous milk note requirement to stipulate that USDA reimburse school districts to make a plant-based dietary alternative that is nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk available in school. Yes, a choice, a real choice. When Congress enacted the milk mandate 80 years ago, the United States was less diverse. We did not understand the exact science surrounding lactose intolerance, yet 70 to 90% of African Americans today are lactose intolerant. 90% of Asians, 95% of Native Americans, and 65% of Latinos are in fact lactose intolerant. The National Institute of Health reports the majority of all people have reduced ability to digest lactose after infancy. And it adds to its also very common in people in West Africa, Arab, Jewish, and Greek and Italian descent. Currently, if a student wants a nutritionally equivalent alternative to milk, they need to get a doctor's note or a parent's note to obtain a plant-based beverage. Oftentimes, parents are working jobs. Oftentimes, unfortunately, parents don't pay as much attention or as in tune and have the opportunity to get to the school or even have health care to go to a doctor to get a note. Should that child still be punished and forced to drink something that their body simply cannot digest? How do you concentrate in the classroom when you are drinking and attempting to digest something that your body cannot? What happens to that child when they belly up to the desk and have to study or pay attention, but their body is telling them that they've eaten something that does not agree with them? It causes problem, it causes ridicule, it causes the ability or inability to concentrate and perform at their highest level. Because of this high barrier to entry, kids often don't. Many skip school or don't do well in school as an alternative. If 75% of African Americans are lactose intolerant, which is true in my family, why should 3/4 of kids have to get a note if It's not a medical disability to be African American. It's not a medical disability to be Vietnamese American. It's not a disability to be Native American. It's not a disability to be Latino. Lactose intolerance is genetic. This isn't complicated. Kids should be given a healthy fluid beverage option that doesn't make them sick. Our amendment would have provided a sensible solution. Allow the USDA to reimburse school districts for soy milk, which so far is the only plant-based milk that has been recognized under the latest formulation of 2020 American Dietary Guidelines to be healthy and nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. Moreover, there's a primary reason that more than half of all children given milk is thrown into a cafeteria trash can, unused. Carton after carton after carton of discarded cartons of milk that have never been opened. Because at some point, kids realize this isn't good for me and they don't drink it. So whatever nutritional value that you thought you were affording by giving milk doesn't happen if young people can't consume or digest it. Many kids don't want milk because it makes them sick. According to the USDA, 29% of cartons of cow's milk served in our schools are thrown into the garbage unopened. This comes out to be somewhere around $300 million in annual waste of the taxpayers' funds for milk cartons. It's clear not only is it a food waste issue, but a failure on the NSLP to supply food to kids that are consumed and meet their daily nutritional requirement. The present rate of food waste and taxpayer losses is unacceptable. I ask my Republican colleagues, do you think it is a good policy, is good stewardship of our tax dollars in delivering good health outcomes for all kids? If you believe it is, then you should agree and recognize that adding a true alternative is a good thing. I remind you, it's not a medical condition to be Black, Latino, Asian, or Jewish, or other ethnicities. This is an issue of racial equity and inclusion, as well as tightening government spending and waste. It's both a matter of squandering tax dollars and a matter of fairness. The kids who have the least, who have the most difficulty raising their voices, are being denied a food staple that they simply cannot stand. We must fix this. Let us strive to do better for the next generation and equip them with the nutritional sustenance at the lunch counter that can give them an opportunity to not just survive, but to thrive. I implore you, think about the children. Don't think about the profit. Don't think about the lobby. Don't think about the efforts of a winner or loser. Let's put children first and make sure that we as a Congress recognize the value of fighting for those who have not been given the opportunity to fight for themselves. Add soy, create true alternatives. Do not force people to digest things that their body simply cannot. It is for this reason, and this reason solely, that I cannot support this measure without true alternatives. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield myself a minute. Mr. Chairman, we're very concerned about waste, and one of the reasons there is so much waste is because whole milk is not allowed, and children don't like the taste of skim milk. We are putting children first. We're not excluding soy drink. It is not milk. It is a plant-based food. It isn't milk, so you can't call it soy milk. You call it soy drink. But it was under our first African-American president in this country that this was designed this way. And the First Lady pushed through these rules and regulations to exclude whole milk, which, by the way, my colleague says has an enormous amount more fat. Well, the fat content of whole milk is about 3.5%, and we're foisting on children 1.5% milk, which doesn't have a very good taste to many of them, and excluding them from 3.5%. And we do not exclude soy drink. This is about inclusion and it's about equity. We want people to be able to drink the kind of milk they want to drink. I yield 2 minutes to Mr. Smucker from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1147, the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, and I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan, bicameral, and utterly fantastic bill. I proudly represent 11th District, which is one of the largest dairy producers in the Northeast. In 2022, 1,300 Lancaster County farms produced 2.1 billion pounds of milk. I visited many of those farms and had many discussions with local school administrators about the importance of child nutrition, and we all agree that milk is a key vehicle for delivering protein, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and vitamins A and D, especially for children. Let's not skim over the facts here. Whole milk is truly the cream of the crop in delivering these key vitamins and nutrients to growing children. Sadly, our nation's kids are not consuming enough dairy. We've seen a decline since we banned whole milk in our schools to receive those essential vitamins and nutrients. We can only begin to calculate the impact that has on their long-term health. So let's not curl away the opportunity to expand dairy consumption in our nation's schools and ensure our children are getting the nutrients necessary to grow strong bones and teeth. Mr. Speaker, all milk puns aside, I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Expanding the universe of options for children to consume vital nutrients and vitamins is important for their long-term health, but also helps these kids be prepared for school, develop into adulthood, and cultivate a 21st century workforce. Mr. Speaker, healthy kids and supporting our dairy farmers are mutually important. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we received a letter from the National Alliance for Nutrition and Activity, which says in part, the passing of H.R. 1147 would be a departure from the long-standing tradition of establishing food and nutrition standards for federal child nutrition programs based upon the findings of independent reviewers and the scientific community. These are evidence-based strategies to increase school meal consumption and, by extension, potentially school milk consumption that do not involve weakening nutrition standards. Changes to school nutrition standards should be guided by the dietary guidelines, not special interests. And as such, we strongly urge you to put children's interests first and uphold the science-based process and oppose the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act of 2023. Children deserve no less. It is signed by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the Advocates for Better Children Diet, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Heart Association, the American Public Health Association, and in Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, Balanced, Center for Biological Diversity, the Center for Science and Public Interest, Jeff Ann Foundation, Friends of the Earth, Healthy Food of America, Healthy Schools Campaign, Lifetime Foundation, the National WIC Association, and the Public Health Institute. I ask that the whole letter be entered into the record by unanimous consent.
The general's request is covered by General Lee.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The lady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, the author of this legislation.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Madam Chair, thank you for your leadership and your support. I rise today in strong support of my legislation, the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, which supports students and dairy farmers across America. Milk is an essential building block for a well-rounded and balanced diet, offering 13 essential nutrients and numerous health benefits. However, out-of-touch federal regulations have imposed dietary restrictions on the types of milk students have access to in school meals. Our ranking member is a dear friend of mine. We've worked together for 15 years, a little longer, but we got a great relationship. We do a lot of bipartisan bills here, like we marked up yesterday. But I have to say, the only special interest here is our kids. And it's kids that have been cheated out of the nutrition that they need. It's kids who have case studies have shown that the rate of obesity and being overweight increased dramatically after access to whole milk and flavor was taken out of the schools. 2007, 2008 was a baseline. 2010, Democrat-led initiative demonized milk fat. In 2020, 2021, there was a study of that same cohort, and obesity has gone up whenever this beverage. My good friend Louisiana, who was just here spoke before, I mean, everybody's entitled to their own facts, their own opinion, but not their own facts. And the facts are that it's the underlying law that was passed back in 2010 by a Democratic House and signed by a Democratic president that quite frankly, required a physician prescription in order for health reasons. Now that is a good part of the law. We didn't touch that. We didn't address that in this bill, so I'm not sure why he's talking about it. It's not germane to the topic that we're talking about today. That actually is the underlying law. The bottom line is that students and parents do have choice, and there's a mechanism to honor that. The only choice they don't have, though, is access to the most nutritious beverage, which is whole milk, and specifically whole milk and flavor. The waste was noted. I appreciate the gentleman from Louisiana sharing how much waste there was, what that amounts to in cartons, half pints, what it amounts to in dollars. That's because of the taste experience. It's not that these kids are throwing the milk away because it's unhealthy for them. It's just a terrible taste experience when you're drinking non-fat, low-fat, non-fat milk. The students have been limited to fat-free or reduced fat milk since the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act was enacted in 2010. While some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have argued that we should not reform individual aspects of the child nutrition, it was that legislation more than a decade ago that singled out milk for regulation, which is why we're here today. There are several reasons why these top-down regulations are harmful to students and school districts that are forced to comply with them. First, we have seen students opt out of consuming milk altogether if they don't have access to a variety they enjoy. According to the 2020 Dietary Guideline Advisory Committee report, more than two-thirds of school-aged children fail to meet the recommended levels of dairy. No kidding. We took out the most nutritious, most tasty, and made it inaccessible to them. Let's face it, the only way to benefit from milk's essential nutrients is to consume it. Now, we're not force-feeding anybody anything. This is about choice. And when students turn away from milk, they often offer far less healthy alternatives that are highly caffeinated, sugar-sweetened, or lack key nutrients. Now, these regulations also perpetuate baseless claims that milk is bad for our kids. Research has shown time and time again that whole and 2% milk are not responsible for childhood obesity and other health concerns. In fact, these beverages are so nutritious that research shows positive health outcomes for kids who consume whole milk. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to insert into the record 15 academic studies from researchers around the world, including from top institutions such as Boston University and Tufts, who have studied the health effects of full-fat dairy.
Gentleman's request is covered by Genevieve.
Thank you. These studies show, among other things, that full-fat dairy foods have little to no association with high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, blood pressure, or cholesterol. In fact, several of these studies show full-fat foods help improve or lower negative health outcomes for children who drink more full-fat dairy beverages.
Time's expired.
Give me 2 minutes. Use less.
I yield the gentleman an additional 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Whole milk, and additionally, since whole milk was removed from the school lunchrooms, the childhood obesity rate has increased according to the CDC and several case studies. Whole milk is not the problem. For children to excel in the classroom and beyond, they must have access to more nutritious options, not fewer. Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act will allow schools participating in the National School Lunch Program to serve all varieties of flavored and unflavored milk, including whole milk. It's important to remember that this legislation does not require any student to drink or any other school to serve whole milk. Rather, this legislation simply gives schools the flexibility to serve a broader variety of milk in the school lunchroom. And additionally, if students have a documented medical condition or disability that prohibits them from safely and comfortably consuming milk, schools are required to offer them an alternative beverage. This legislation will not change that standard. Proud to have 134 bipartisan co-sponsors from 44 states. And the bottom line is Whole Milk for Healthy Kids is all about ensuring students have the necessary nutrients to learn and to grow. And with that, I yield back and I thank the gentle lady.
Gentlelady from North Carolina Reserves, gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you advise how much time is available on both sides?
Gentleman from Virginia has 17 and a half minutes remaining. Gentlelady from North Carolina has 13 and a half minutes remaining.
Thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Was recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Pennsylvania and I have enjoyed working together on many different bills. On this bill, we happen to disagree. He has presented evidence on the floor that instead of being considered by members of Congress, really ought to be considered by the experts in the normal scientific process. If the school children are to get the benefit of his studies, tell it to the experts, not the politicians. I would hope that we would stick with the scientific process and keep as we're doing. Stick with the DGAs, and not the political process and changing the process by trying to convince members of Congress who are subject to political pressures on one side or another. So I would hope that we would stick to that process and not the political process. And if you have studies, show it to the experts, not the politicians. Reserve.
Virginia Reserve, gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, the Vice Chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, Ms. Miller.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Chairman Thompson and Chairwoman Fox for sponsoring this important legislation. I rise in support of H.R. 1147, the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. This crucial legislation recognizes the nutritional benefits of whole milk for children. As a result of the radical Obama administration policies led by Michelle Obama, only fat-free and low-fat milk can be served in school meals. H.R. 1147 would end this practice and allow schools to serve whole milk. Whole milk is a rich source of essential nutrients, including calcium and vitamin D, which are vital for developing strong bones and a healthy immune system. Studies have also shown that whole milk can contribute to healthier weight in children. I raised my 7 children on whole fat milk, and they're all within normal weights. And I also have recognized that children that have high fat diets stay full longer. I am proud to support this bill on behalf of parents, and I want to thank America's dairy farmers for producing milk for our families. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from North Carolina Reserves, recognized. Reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina Reserves.
Mr. Chair, my understanding is that there was a limit to what my colleague from Pennsylvania could put under general leave, and so I wish to insert 5 pieces under general leave and under my comments.
Gentlelady's request covered under general leave.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from North Carolina Reserves, gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Chairman, I reserve.
The gentleman from Virginia is reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in support of the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, which will allow schools to offer both unflavored and flavored whole milk for students. Whole milk provides children with 13 essential nutrients for growth, development, immunity, and brain function. Whole milk also serves as the top source of protein, calcium, potassium, and vitamin D for children. I am a proud co-sponsor of this vital legislation, and I thank my good friend Chairman Thompson for introducing this common sense bill. For too long, poor federal policy has kept whole milk out of our school cafeterias. This common sense legislation puts the health and well-being of our children first, and as a father of two young sons myself, I'm proud to support this bill, and I urge my colleagues to join me in doing so. Also, as a father, I would note that I see every day the illustration of how my children react to whole milk versus skim milk, and I would just give that first-hand impression. But I also would say the science supports it, and I would like to submit these scientific studies for the record as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's request is covered under general leave.
Thank you. I yield.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Dr. Joyce.
Gentleman recognized.
I thank you, Dr. Fox, and thank you for yielding. I rise in support of the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids bill. As a doctor, I know the benefits of whole milk, and I know they can have benefits for Americans of all ages. Whole milk is 96.5% fat-free. According to a study conducted that lasted more than 15 years and was published in the Lancet Journal of Medicine, individuals who consume more than 2 dairy products each day have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. There are lower morbidity associated with those who have whole milk and whole milk products in their diet. The 13 essential nutrients that are found in milk are vital for the development of bones, muscles, and even brain tissue in our nation's children. By banning healthy milk products from our schools, misguided policies that were crafted and implemented by the Obama administration have led students to turn away from milk and dairy products and turn to highly caffeinated and sugary drinks. Those drinks have very little nutritional value. Pennsylvania's 13th congressional district is home to the most number of dairy cows in our Commonwealth. Recently, I had the chance to visit Gallagher's Dairy Company in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. For the past 4 generations, Gallagher's has processed milk from 46 regional family dairy farms. These products end up with retailers, in grocery stores, and in schools across the Northeast. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act will ensure that whole and 2% milk processed at facilities like Gallagher's will make its way to school lunchrooms. I urge all of my colleagues to vote for nutrition by supporting this legislation. Thank you. And the
Gentleman from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Louisiana for painting a vivid and completely disingenuous picture of junior high school students being held down and having milk forced down their throats in a school cafeteria. I will also take the opportunity, I can't believe I'm doing this, Ms. Fox, doctor, the fat content of whole milk is actually 3.25%, making it 96.7% fat-free. So when we look at the science, we read this definition. Milk means the lacteal secretion practically free from colostrum obtained by the complete milking of one or more healthy cows. There's soy milk not in there because it's not milk. Neither is almond milk. It comes from a mammal. I strongly support this bill, and I'm looking forward to having our children have healthy, nutritious choices in their schools. And with that, I yield back. Thank you for your time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro.
Gentleman recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to sponsor the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act and urge my colleagues to support its adoption. After over 10 years of schools having to comply with a nonsensical ban, I'm excited to work on this bill to provide full flavor, nutrient-dense milk to kids once again. Parents and physicians have known the benefits of milk for generations. Nearly 70% of milk consumed at home is whole, or 2% because it actually tastes good. It's packed with vitamins, and most importantly, kids actually love it. I know my four do. Full-fat milk give parents alternatives to soda that their kids actually want to drink. Kids have been strangely barred from having their favorite milk choices in schools. The result has been a decline in milk consumption in schools, and when kids are drinking less milk, they're losing out on nutrients that are critical for their healthy development. Milk is the top source protein, calcium, phosphorus, and vitamin D for kids, and it provides 7 of the 14 nutrients the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends for brain development. The bottom line is that limiting milk in schools and reduces consumption of essential nutrients, pushes kids towards sugar alternatives, and has led to less healthy kids. As the representative for hundreds of family-owned dairy farms in New York and as a parent to 4 kids, I have one special interest: the health standard of the kids growing up in our communities. And I'm excited to take this long overdue action to repeal a ridiculous ban. And I'm grateful to Chairman Thompson for his leadership to get the full-fat milk back in schools. I encourage my colleagues to vote for this bipartisan bill, and with that, I yield back.
Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California and my classmate, Mr. Costa.
For 2 minutes. Let me speak in favor of this important bipartisan legislation. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act is an investment, I believe, in our children's health and future. This proposed legislation, let's be clear, does not change the underlying law. 19 years that I've been on the House Ag Committee, the school lunch and breakfast program has been and should be a focus of attention by the House of Representatives and the Congress. Why? Because we provide the support for the school lunch and breakfast programs. And why else? Because we want our children to have the most nutrition possible from lunch and breakfast. In addition, we want to deal with issues of obesity and issues of allergies. It's important for a healthy future. Now, let me say that I know a little bit about this. My family and I have been involved in the dairy business in California for 3 generations, since the early 1920s. Dairy plays a critical role in the nutritional diet of children as a leading food source with nutrients critical for the development of growth. We must provide healthy, nutrient-packed options that children will actually choose to consume, ranging from non-fat to whole. Milk provides 13 essential nutrients, as has been mentioned, including 3 of the 4 nutrients of public health concern that involve calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. A few months ago, I visited the Fresno Unified Nutrition Center. Fresno Unified is the 3rd largest school district in California, 73,000 students. They prepare 45,000 lunches a day and 15,000 breakfasts at 85 school sites. It's a big undertaking for this nutritional program. And what we know is that for many of the kids, the breakfast or the lunch they get is sometimes the best meal they get in a day. So therefore, we need to be focused on this. Our schools must be equipped with the nutritional school options. We must be available and flexible to new scientific developments that are made. And when kids...
Time expired.
I'll give the gentleman an additional minute.
Thank you. Recognized.
Our schools must be equipped with nutritional school milk options. This is what this legislation attempts to try to do. Kids like their school milk options that are flavorful and tasteful. They consume them at levels that they should. When kids, I think, like their choices for lunch or breakfast, America succeeds. And let me close by saying, everybody needs milk. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserve. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are waiting for one more speaker to come, so I will yield myself a minute.
The lady's recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I want to reiterate some points that were made before. We are not being driven by any special interest group lobby. We are being driven by the special interest group of children. We want children in school to have access to whole milk, which, as my colleagues have pointed out, is 96.75% fat-free. But it provides one of the most nutritious meals that children can have. We are seeing tremendous waste in the schools. We are not excluding soy drink. The policy that we are trying to overcome here by providing whole milk to children was a policy passed under the Obama administration. We're not trying to harm minorities in any way whatsoever. We want everybody to have the choice to drink soy drink, whole milk, skim milk, 1% milk, whatever. We don't understand. I yield myself 15 seconds.
Gentle lady is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, what this bill has been terribly mischaracterized by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. It's about healthy choices for children. With that, I reserve.
Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, could you advise how much time is available on both sides?
Gentleman from Virginia, 16.5 minutes remaining. Gentlelady from North Carolina has 3 1/4 minutes. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Mueller.
Gentleman recognized.
I thank Chairwoman Fox very much for her leadership on this and very important issue. Mr. Chairman, kids love milk, but our schools have been prohibited from providing children whole milk since 2010, and frankly, it was based upon false science. Milk is a healthy choice for our children. It has 13 essential nutrients that kids need: calcium, protein, iron, vitamin D, potassium, and more. And compared to soda or iced tea, which kids will turn to without a healthy alternative, a carton of milk has only 1/3 the sugar in a can of Coca-Cola. We as adults and representatives need to give our children and grandchildren the options to make healthy choices. We need this legislation to put whole milk back in our schools. And, Mr. Speaker, would you be surprised to know that whole milk is 96.75% fat-free? To say whole milk is unhealthy for kids is, if you will, utterly ridiculous. Let's do the right thing by our children, families, and dairy farmers by passing a Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. It's time to ask American school children if they once again got milk. Yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to close.
Thank you,
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed that my Republican colleagues are attempting to make school meals less healthy by ignoring the latest science and undermining President Biden's work to strengthen school meal nutrition. The latest DGAs have already made clear that fat-free milk and low-fat milk are the healthiest options for children. And if anybody has studies or research to the contrary, they should submit it to experts in the normal process rather than politicians. This bill goes against the dairy industry's recent commitment to ensuring students have access to the healthiest dairy options consistent with the DGAs. Mr. Chairman, we should be committed to ensuring that students have access to the healthiest dairy options in accordance with science-based guidelines. But H.R. 1147 contradicts this commitment by interfering with the independent process that aligns child nutrition standards with the latest science. I'm also disappointed that we're considering a bill that does nothing to meaningfully address child nutrition or hunger. This is a stark contrast contrast to the comprehensive science-based reauthorization of the federal child nutrition programs that committee Democrats advanced last Congress to, among other things, strengthen evidence-based nutrition standards for school meals beyond just milk. Bottom line is that Congress should not inject politics into child nutrition standards at the expense of nutritious meals that our children need to grow healthy. Therefore, urge my colleagues to oppose H.R. 1147 and yield back the balance of the time.
Gentleman from Virginia yields. Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I've seen a lot of bills mischaracterized on this floor in my time here, but I think this is one of the worst. Passing the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act would be a critical step towards empowering parents and securing our children's well-being. Whole milk isn't just a beverage. It's a vital source of nutrients essential for children's growth. Denying access to its calcium, vitamin D, and protein threatens to inhibit their development. To the anti-milk advocates, I have one thing to ask you. What do you have against milk? If you scrutinize them closely, you might be convinced that Democrats are waging a war on dairy. The Democrat administration has presided over a 15% milk price increase at the grocery store. A Democrat proposal, the Green New Deal, calls for the elimination of cows for their so-called greenhouse gas emissions. A Democrat policy is slashing the milk available to newborns through the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children by 4 quarts. A Democrat interest group, PETA, has called milk a so-called white supremacist symbol. Patently absurd. Let's end the war on milk. Pass the bill. Together we can ensure that our children have access to the nutritional foundation they need to thrive and become the healthy, vibrant leaders of tomorrow. I urge all my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The amendment and the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Education and the Workforce, printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as an original bill for purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be considered as read. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in House Report 118-308. Each such further amendment be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It's now in order to consider amendment number 1, printed in House Report 118-308. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in House Report 118-308, offered by Mrs. Luna of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 922, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Luna, and a member opposed, each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
I yield as much time as I may consume. I'm happy to be here today to draw attention to something that is important to our children's health, parental choice, and the many farms across our nation. For years, American school lunches have lagged behind other countries' programs in terms of health and nutrition. European and Asian students often have access to fresher and healthier meals than students in the United States. This problem has been worsened by the federal government over-regulating what schools are allowed to serve our children, in particular, preventing schools from offering whole milk to students. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act would allow students who participate in the National School Lunch Program to serve their students whole milk. But my amendment goes a step further by ensuring schools may also offer their students to use organic milk as well. For food we give our children and where it comes from is incredibly important. My family empowers parents and the ability that they have to decide what is healthiest for their children. As many parents know, high-quality nutrition is closely related to better academic and behavioral outcomes in children. Allowing parents to choose organic milk is a step in the right direction. Studies have also found that organic milk contains more omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants than non-organic milk, which helps with brain function, heart and health, and fights heart disease regularly and respectively. Of course, it is vital that we also know where this milk comes from. Organic or not, far too often Congress listens to special interests and big lobbyists and ignores countless family farmers who are the backbone of our country. Our organic family farmers and the countless unseen families who feed our nation are invaluable to our country. These farmers work many long, thankless hours to bring us nutrient-rich, high-quality milk. And on behalf of my family and I thank you. I'm thankful to be able to be here today to continue to empower and fight for our children. I thank those that are helping to bring organic milk to our country. I reserve the balance of our time.
Gentlewoman reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I seek common opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I give myself some time as I consume. Mr. Chairman, nothing in this bill prevents schools from offering organic milk under current law. It's the main barrier for schools offering organic milk is cost. Nothing in this amendment provides additional funding or support to help schools offer organic milk if they prefer. Fundamentally, this amendment does not fix the flaws of the underlying bill. It invites Congress to legislate on specific foods served on school meals at the expense of evidence-based recommendations from experts. According to those experts, milk is the top source of saturated fat in American diets. Whole and 2% milk can raise bad cholesterol, the cause of heart disease, and contains more fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and calories than 1% in fat-free milk. This has led to organizations such as the CDC to recommend nutrient-rich 1% of fat-free milk instead of 2% for whole milk. For children age 2 and up, the inclusion of whole milk in the bill disregards the healthy dietary patterns backed by the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the scientific, evidence-based, comprehensive set of nutrition recommendations. Over 60 organizations have expressed concerns over attempts to bring whole milk back into school meal programs. Regardless of whether milk is organic, inclusion of whole milk in this bill is detrimental to American youth's health and well-being, and the amendment fails to alter that fact. So I oppose the underlying bill and oppose the amendment and reserve the balance of time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to how much time I have remaining?
Gentlelady has 3 minutes remaining.
I yield myself the balance remaining of my time.
Ordered.
I hear a lot from my colleagues across the aisle on the experts, but I also wonder how many people in Congress have had to use the national school lunch programs, and frankly, I've been one of those people. So when I hear people speak in opposition to this, saying that it's going to hurt minority, it's going to hurt those of us who have actually had to use the program, I find it ironic. Frankly, I think that we need more people in office that have had rough upbringing to bring a different lens and perspective, to hear that whole milk is bad for children, to hear arguments against organic milk, and hear the arguments that are coming from across the aisle. I don't know that it represents necessarily the best interest of the American people other than political spite. I yield back my time.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from
I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 118-308. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 118-308, offered by Mr. Mills of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 922, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mills, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment prohibits schools from participating in the school lunch program under the Act from purchasing or offering milk produced by Chinese state-owned enterprises that may be operating here in the United States or elsewhere. As many of us know, in 2008, melamine scandal exposed systemic corruption and disregard for the safety standards within China's own dairy industry. This scandal resulted in the death of infants and sickened thousands more, highlighting the devastating consequences of lax regulations and unethical practices. The evidence is clear. These enterprises pose a serious threat to our consumers' health, our economic security, and our national interests. We can't allow CCP enterprises to export their dangerous practices to our school lunches. This is an issue maintaining American control of critical supply chains that the Chinese state-owned enterprises have no business being in our schools. Florida is one of the largest cattle producers in America, and there's no way I will allow producers in my state to be compromised by the CCP or the PRC. If we fail to act, we risk losing our family farms and jeopardizing the livelihoods of thousands of Americans. This is not about trade isolationism. It's about protecting our children in schools from unsafe products, ensuring fair competition for American producers, and safeguarding our national security. The potential consequences of inaction are simply too great for me to ignore. And the quality and safety of food that we provide to our children is paramount, and we cannot compromise on these standards. We must be vigilant about our source and production practices of the product that we are present in our educational institutions and safeguard them from adversaries who do not share our same interests. Prohibiting schools from purchasing or offering milk produced by China's state-owned enterprises operating in the United States and elsewhere, we aim to send a clear message about our commitment to health and the safety of our children. Last year, over 30 million school children relied on school lunches for their nutrition. We've seen the CCP has approached other industries, and we cannot allow such an important sector to become vulnerable at a time of crisis. Therefore, I urge you to join me in preventing the CCP-supported entities from infiltrating school lunches and a key American supply chain. This is a necessary step to protect the health and well-being of our citizens, safeguard our economy, and defend our national interests. Let us send a clear message that we will prioritize the safety and security of our nation's school children above all else. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman for Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield myself as time as I may consume. Mr. Chairman, nobody disputes that the dairy industry is a crucial part of domestic supply chains and provides an important economic benefit to the tune of over $753 billion to the U.S. economy. In 2022, just 5 states, California, Wisconsin, Idaho, Texas, and New York, collectively produced more than 50% of the U.S. annual milk supply. School breakfast and school lunch programs are already required to purchase domestic agricultural commodities and food products. Although exemptions exist, milk is produced in sufficient quantities in the U.S. and at competitive prices to severely restrict the ability of any school to purchase farm-produced milk. To this end, the amendment does not fix the flaws of the underlying bill and makes no meaningful improvements to Buy American policies. We can make sure that Chinese milk is not breaching our supply chain with continued monitoring and enforcement of present law. The recent report found that Chinese seafood has been served in schools, highlighting the need for additional diligence in enforcing present law. I don't support the underlying legislation, and I oppose the amendment as being unnecessary and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman is recognized from Florida.
Well, it's interesting, and I understand that facts, for whatever reason, seem to sink in a lot slower on the left than they do in America's party. So I'll say this once more. In 2008, melamine scandal exposed systemic corruption and disregard for complete safety by milk that was produced by the dairy products of China. So it's interesting that you say that they aren't actually weakening anything when they had infants and children, thousands, who had died and were sick by their actual capabilities or incapability capacity. So again, facts are a very fickle thing. They are oftentimes slowly leaked in on the left. But you can't dispute that China's production of dairy has been less safe and less under the regulations and rigorous streams that they do in American production under the FDA. With that, I go ahead and yield.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman yield back his time.
Gentleman yield back.
Okay. Thank you. I yield myself the balance of the time. Just to reiterate, the present law requires domestic purchase. So this is unnecessary. And if Chinese milk has gotten into the supply, we need to monitor that. It violates the present law. And to suggest that we're ignoring science, the underlying bill is a ignore science. That's the purpose of the underlying bill. So I would hope that we would reject the amendment and reject the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 3 printed in House Report 118-308. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in House Report number 118-308, offered by Mr. Tiffany of Wisconsin.
Pursuant to House Resolution 922, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, Merry Christmas. My bipartisan amendment prevents the USDA from issuing any rule that bans any of the milk covered in this bill, including chocolate milk. This would ensure that all types and flavors of milk are available to school children and not subject to bureaucratic rulemaking. Some may ask, why are we focusing on this issue? Unfortunately, it's because the USDA has its sights on getting rid of chocolate milk in schools. It's now up to us to act. This summer it was reported that the Department of Agriculture is considering a ban on chocolate milk in elementary and middle schools. USDA issued a proposed rule that would set a new nutrition standard for school meals. These new standards could limit the availability of flavored milk like chocolate and strawberry in high schools, where children in elementary and middle school would have no access at all. For those of you with young children or grandchildren, go and ask them what they think about USDA's new rule. I think I can speak for most folks when saying that when I was young, chocolate milk was usually the highlight of having lunch at school. But this new rule would mean that roughly 30 million students participate in the USDA's school meal programs would no longer be able to have chocolate milk or any flavored milk for that matter. According to the Journal of the American Dietetic Association, removing flavored milk from schools resulted in a 62 to 63% reduction in milk consumption by kids in kindergarten through 5th grade, including a 50% reduction in 6th through 8th grades. Milk is full of rich nutrients that support bone growth and development, and millions of children enjoy drinking it. We should not allow rules that would limit our children's access to delicious and nutritious products like milk and its varieties covered in this great bill. Come and take it, USDA. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bipartisan amendment.
Gentleman reserved.
I reserve.
For what purpose from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I the time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, myself, time as I may consume. Mr. Mr. Chairman, current law requires that school meals and beverages offered under the school meal programs be consistent with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the DGAs, which are drafted by the Advisory Committee of Experts. These are evidence-based recommendations set to provide nutritional guidance to ensure children receive the most nutritious meals possible. This amendment would effectively undermine the unbiased, evidence-based guidelines of the DGA by prohibiting USDA from doing its work and replacing that process with a process where evidence will be presented to politicians and we get to decide the science. It is critical that actual scientists and experts make the recommendations and guide the process in determining options in schools, and the regulations that are updated to align with current DGAs. Experts, not members of Congress, should be the ones determining the nutrition standards to ensure that our children get the healthiest meals possible.